Anchored in 600 feet of water, the Magnate bobbed gently as the last golden flecks of sunlight reflected from the sea. On the main deck of the yacht, her weary crew watched as thousands of California seals and sea lions stretched out upon the rocky, uninhabited landmass of the Farallones. When Maggie learned that Jonas had predicted the megalodon would eventually end up in California waters, she wasted no time in organizing her expedition to the Farallon Islands. The Farallones were the center point of an expanse of ocean known as the Red Triangle. Of all the documented attacks by great whites worldwide, over half occurred here. If Jonas's prediction proved accurate, Maggie figured that the megalodon would waste little time in coming to the center of the Red Triangle to hunt sea lions, the preferred prey of the great white shark. For 5 straight days, the film crew had waited impatiently for the megalodon to show itself. Underwater video cameras, audio equipment, and special underwater lights littered the ship's deck, along with cigarette butts and candy wrappers. A community laundry line had been hung along the upper deck, dangling swimsuits, underwear, and shorts. Trailing the yacht on a 30-foot steel cable floated the rotting carcass of a male humpback whale. The pungent smell seemed to hover over the Magnate as if to mark the crime, for killing a whale in the Monterey Bay Sanctuary was indeed a criminal act. No matter, with his financial influence, Bud had made a deal with 2 local fishermen to locate and deliver a whale carcass to their location, no questions asked. But now, after nearly 38 hours of the wicked stench, the Magnate's crew were ready to mutiny. Maggie, listen to me," begged her director, Rodney Miller. "You've got to give us a break here. 24 hours of shore leave, that's all I'm requesting. It could be weeks, months, before this megalodon even ventures into these waters. All of us need a break. Even a fresh shower would be heaven. Just get us off this smelly barge." "Rod, listen to me. This is the story of the decade, and I'm not about to blow it because you and your cronies feel the need to get drunk in some sleazy hotel bar." "Come on, Maggie." "No, Rod. Have you any idea how difficult it was to organize all of this? The cameras, the shark tube, not to mention that hunk of whale blubber floating behind us." "Yeah, don't mention it," he said sarcastically. "Whatever happened to your campaign for protecting the whales? Gee, I would have sworn that it was you I saw on stage accepting a golden eagle on behalf of the Save the Whales Foundation." "Christ, Rod, grow up, will you? I didn't kill the fucking whale, I'm just using its carcass as bait. Look around you, there are thousands of the goddamn things migrating into the sanctuary. Get real. Can't you see that this may be the biggest story of the decade?" She shook her head, her blonde hair sticking to her bare shoulders. "Mags," Rod lowered his voice, "you're grasping at straws. Honestly, what are the chances of the megalodon actually showing up in the Red Triangle? No one's even reported seeing the thing in the last 2 weeks. Listen, Rod, if there's one subject my good-for-nothing husband knows about, it's these megalodons. The Meg will show, believe me, and we'll be the ones to get the exclusive pictures." "In what, that piece of plastic? Christ, Maggie, you'd have to be suicidal." "That plastic is 3-inch thick plexiglass. Its diameter is too wide for even the Meg to get its mouth on," Maggie laughed. "I'll probably be safer in there than you guys will be on the Magnate." "There's a comforting thought." Maggie ran her fingers across her director's sweaty chest. She knew Bud was still in bed, sleeping off another hangover. "Rod, you and I have worked very hard together on these projects. Hell, look how much good our whale documentary did for those beasts." Rod smirked. "Tell that one to your dead humpback." "Forget that already, damn it." She grabbed his oily shoulders in her hands. "Rod, don't you get it? This is the one. This is the story that puts both of us on top. Both of us. How does executive producer sound to you?" Miller thought for a moment, then smiled. "Sounds good. It's yours. Now, can we forget about the dead whale for a moment?" "I guess so." Bending over to pick up her wetsuit, she rewarded Miller with a glimpse of her tanned, thonged behind. "One other thing, Rod. Do me a favor and don't mention anything to Bud about being my executive producer." She smiled sweetly. "He gets jealous." As the thousands of beating hearts and pulsing fins overloaded the megalodon's sensory array, The albino creature gently ascended within the walls of the Monterey Bay Canyon. Darkness had finally fallen. It was time to feed. Jaws agape, the Meg accelerated toward the two mammals, aiming for the fluke of a blue whale calf, careful not to venture too close to the larger mother's tail. And then, just as she was about to strike, something happened. The megalodon shook wildly, her back arching in an uncontrollable spasm. She abandoned her prey, descending rapidly to the canyon floor. Her muscular body quivered, and she began swimming in tight circles, her internal organs twitching out of control. And then, with a mighty shudder that shook her entire frame, a fully developed megalodon pup emerged from its mother's left oviduct. It was a female, pure white and 11 feet long, already weighing 1,500 pounds. The teeth were smaller but sharper than its mother's. With its senses fully developed, the newborn was capable of hunting and surviving on its own. It hovered momentarily, icy blue eyes focused on the adult, instinct warning the pup of imminent danger. With a burst of speed, it glided south along the canyon floor. Still circling in convulsions, the female shuddered again, expelling a second pup in a cloud of blood and embryonic fluid. The 7.5-foot male twisted towards the bottom, righted itself, then shook its head to clear its vision. With a flick of her caudal fin, the Meg pounced upon the newborn male from behind, severing its entire caudal fin and genitals as she snapped her jaws shut. Convulsing wildly and trailing a stream of blood, the dying pup writhed to the bottom, out of control. Giving immediate chase, the female finished her offspring in one last bite. The megalodon hovered near the bottom, exhausted from the efforts of labor. Opening her mouth, she permitted the canyon's current to circulate through her mouth and over her body, allowing her gills to breathe. Slowly, the head rotated from side to side, nostrils flaring, channeling water. Now the predator could see the sanctuary through her olfactory senses. Once again, the female detected the maddening vibrations of the migrating whales, and something else: blood. The megalodon swung her caudal fin back and forth, regaining her momentum and rising. She resumed her northerly movement, passing within 30 feet of the concrete canal entrance that connected the Tanaka Lagoon with the Pacific Ocean. They came without warning, catching the disgruntled crew of the Magnate completely by surprise. Captain Talbot spotted the lead-gray dorsal fin first, slicing through the dark waters of the Pacific 20 feet off the starboard side of the yacht. Within several minutes, 2 more fins appeared, cutting back and forth through the slick of bloody chum. Rod Miller found Maggie already pulling on her luminescent white wetsuit for a night test dive. "Okay, Maggie, you wanted some action. How about a test dive with 3 great whites?" "Relax, Rodney." Maggie was smiling. "Is everyone ready?" "Both remotes are in the water, underwater lights are on, and the plastic tube is all set for you. Oh yeah, Bud's still asleep." "Sounds good. Now remember, I want it to look like I'm all alone in the water with the sharks. How much cable is attached to my tube?" Rod thought. "I'm guessing you've got about 60 or 70 feet of line, but we'll keep you in around 40 feet or you'll lose the light." "Okay, I'm ready," she announced. "Grab my camera, Rod. I want to be in the water before Bud wakes up." Maggie and Rod hurried to the starboard side where the plastic shark cylinder awaited. 10 feet long, 12 feet in diameter, the container had been custom-made for Maggie from a design originally developed in Australia. Unlike a steel mesh shark cage, the shark tube could not be bitten or bent. It would maintain positive buoyancy at 40 feet, and it afforded the photographer an unobstructed view. The cylinder was attached by steel cable to a winch on board the Magnate. Secured to the Magnate's hull were 2 remote-controlled underwater cameras that would be operated on deck. While Maggie was filming the megalodon, the crew would be filming Maggie. If the lighting worked properly, the shark tube would remain invisible in the water, giving the terrifying appearance of Maggie exposed and alone in the water with the sharks. The tube was already overboard. Squatting on its edge, Maggie reached back to receive the 40-pound camera from Rod. Allowing the bulky casing to drop through the opening first, she slipped into the water, pulled the hatch closed above her, and sank into the center of the plastic tube. Miller and another crewman let out the steel cable slowly, watching as the tube slipped underwater and drifted out to sea. Maggie shivered from the potent combination of adrenaline and 58-degree water. Her world was now shades of grays and blacks, visibility poor. She glanced behind, locating the two remotes and their set of lights, and as she did, they activated, lighting her plastic refuge and the surrounding waters for 15 to 20 feet in every direction. Moments later, the first predator entered her arena. It was a male, 17 feet from snout to tail, weighing a full ton. It circled the plastic tube warily, and Maggie rotated to compensate. Her eyes detected movement from below as a 15-foot female rose out of the shadows, catching Maggie totally off guard. Forgetting she was in a protective tube, she panicked, frantically kicking her fins in an effort to get away. The shark's snout banged into the bottom of the tube, just as Maggie's head collided with the closed hatch above. She smiled in relief and embarrassment at her own stupidity. Peter Arnold was also smiling. The footage was incredible, and scary as hell. Maggie appeared totally alone in the water with the three killers, and the artificial lighting combined with the white dive suit worked perfectly. The viewer would not be able to detect the protective tube. "Rod, this is great stuff," he announced. "Our audience will be squirming in their seats. I gotta admit it, Maggie really has a knack for the work." Rod watched as the great whites began tearing at the humpback carcass. "Film everything, Pete. Maybe we'll be able to convince her to quit before this megalodon actually shows up." But Miller had a hard time believing that himself. Bud Harris kicked the silk sheets off his naked body and reached for the bottle of Jack Daniels. Empty. Damn it! He sat up, his head pounding. It had been 2 days, and still he couldn't get rid of the nagging headache. "It's that damn whale," he said out loud. "The smell's killing me. Why do I let her talk me into these things? Enough's enough." He grabbed a pair of swim trunks and his bathrobe and headed up on deck. "Where's Maggie?" he demanded. Abby Schwartz sat on deck monitoring the audio track. "She's in the tube, Bud. Hey, we're getting some great—" "We're leaving, Rodney." Rod Miller looked up. "Really? That's the best news I've heard all week. When?" "Now. Pull Maggie in and cut that damn whale loose before the Coast Guard arrests us." "Wait." Peter Arnold held up his hand. "Something's happening out there. Look at my monitor. It's getting brighter." The great whites had disappeared. And then Maggie saw the glow illuminating what remained of the humpback carcass. The head appeared as big as her mother's mobile home and totally white. She felt her heart pounding in her ears, unable to comprehend the size of the creature that was casually approaching the bait. The snout rubbed against the offering first, testing it. Then the jaws opened. The first bite separated a 6-foot chunk of blubber from the carcass. The second swallowed it whole. The movement of the powerful jaw sending quivers across the gill slits, vibrating the flesh along its stomach. Maggie felt herself drifting to the bottom of the shark tube. She couldn't move. She was in total awe of the megalodon, its power, its nobility and grace. She raised her camera slowly, afraid she might alert the creature. It continued feeding. "Pull her back in now, Miller." Bud sounded anxious. He had seen the size of the meg on the monitor. Maggie was in danger. "She's going to be mighty pissed off," said Peter Arnold. "Listen to me, both of you," demanded Bud. "This is my yacht. I'm paying for everything. Get her in, now." Rod started the winch, the steel cable snapping to attention as it began dragging the shark cylinder through the water. The meg stopped feeding, her senses alerted to the sudden movement. Being plastic, the shark tube had not given off any electronic vibrations, and so the predator had ignored it. Now the meg abandoned the carcass, sculling forward to examine the new stimulus. Maggie watched the megalodon approach. It rubbed its snout along the curvature of the shark tube, confused. Now it turned, focusing with its left eye.